This story isn't easy to tell, but I think it matters, especially if you've ever tried so hard to give your child everything, only to realize too late that what they really needed was something you never thought to offer. My name is Michelle. I'm 46 years old. I'm a mother, a teacher, a type A list maker, and I've always believed that structure is love. That if you keep your children busy enough, prepared enough, supported enough, they'll grow into everything you weren't. Stronger, smarter, safer. My daughter, Natalie, is 18, or was when this happened. She's brilliant, quiet, funny when she lets you in, the kind of girl teachers remember for all the right reasons. Straight A's, never late, always polite. People used to joke that she was like a little adult from the time she was 10. She used to color code her own notebooks. She made me look like I had it all figured out. She was the kind of girl who seemed like she'd never need saving. Until the night I found the letter. But to explain that moment, what it meant, what it cracked open in me, I have to tell you how that day began. And how it ended. It was one of those June mornings that feels manufactured. Sky spotless, air warm but polite, breeze just right. We woke up early. Natalie always liked being on time for big days. She laid out her gown on the bed the night before, made a checklist in her notes app, even wrote a short speech that I helped her polish. She was the valedictorian. Of course she was. I used to joke that she was born studying. She smiled when I said it. At least, I think she did. That morning, she didn't talk much. Said she didn't sleep well. I thought it was nerves. Big day, lots of eyes on her. I offered to do her hair. She said she was fine. Said she wanted to look just like herself. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching her drink tea in silence, her robe folded over her arm. There was something in her face I couldn't quite place. Not fear, not sadness, just distance. I told myself it was part of growing up. That was always my excuse. The ceremony was outside. Folding chairs, a modest stage, a couple hundred proud parents half melting under the sun. I found our seats up front. I got there early, of course. I saved the perfect view for her big moment. She was called to the stage, third from the last. I remember her walking up slowly. Her steps didn't match the pace of the applause. When she reached the mic, the crowd settled. She stood there for a few seconds, looked out at the rows of faces, looked down at her notes, looked at her principal, then back at the paper. And then she stepped back and walked off stage. No speech, no explanation, just gone. A few gasps, some nervous laughter. The principal recovered quickly, moved on to the next name. The crowd clapped. People turned to whisper, but no one said anything to me. Not really. Just polite, confused smiles. I sat there, still smiling too, frozen. She didn't meet my eyes. She didn't eat dinner, said she was tired, went to bed early. I let her. I didn't want to press. I thought, let her sleep it off. It's probably just a panic attack or nerves. Kids these days, you know. Around 10:30, I went to her room to leave her favorite dessert on her nightstand, a little store-bought tiramisu I picked up on the way home, a small peace offering. That's when I saw the letter. It was on her pillow, folded carefully, addressed to me, to Mom, in her handwriting, neat, centered, underlined once. I picked it up and stood there for a moment. My fingers started to shake. I hadn't felt that since the night she went missing for 20 minutes at the mall when she was 6. I sat down on the edge of her bed. The room was too quiet. And then I opened it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't thick, just a single sheet folded in thirds. But when I unfolded it, the edges didn't lie flat right away.
She must have held it in her hands for a long time. There was no date, no greeting beyond "to Mom," and she hadn't signed her name at the bottom. She didn't need to. The first line was simple. I didn't want to ruin today, but I also didn't want to pretend anymore. And then, as I kept reading, the words shifted into something more painful than anything I could have imagined. She wrote that for as long as she could remember, she'd been chasing a finish line that never seemed to come, that every test, every certificate, every perfect report card didn't feel like an achievement. It felt like relief, like she'd earned a few more days of being seen, of being safe. She said that somewhere along the way she stopped doing things because they made her happy and started doing them because I looked proud. And at first that was enough, but then it wasn't. She described school as a performance, a well-rehearsed act that began at 7:30 and ended only when she closed her bedroom door. She said she used to lie in bed and wonder who she would be if she wasn't always trying to be impressive. She wrote that she didn't hate me. She never had, but she was angry. Angry at how I celebrated every win like it was proof that she was okay, instead of asking if she really was. Angry at how I told other people she was so mature, when all she wanted was to be a kid, to make mistakes without them being lessons. Angry that I saw her as strong when she was breaking. I don't remember exactly how far I got before I started crying, but by the end of the letter I couldn't stop. Not the silent, movie-style kind of tears, the real kind, the kind that come in waves and feel like shame. Because that's what I felt. Not confusion, not even hurt, just shame. Because she was right. I hadn't seen it. Or maybe I had in flashes, but I dismissed it. I told myself that she was just tired or under pressure like everyone else. I had told myself she was built like me, that she was tough, disciplined, resilient. But she wasn't me. And that was the part I had ignored for too long. The letter ended with a few words I'll never forget. I don't want to hate the life I've built, but I'm afraid that if I keep going like this, I will. Please don't ask me what you did wrong. Just try to see me now, not the version of me you planned for. That sentence broke something in me. Not because it was cruel, it wasn't. It was honest. It was what I had needed to hear a long time ago. But more than anything, it made me realize that I hadn't just missed signs. I had rewritten them. Smiles as confidence, silence as strength, exhaustion as dedication. I had turned every red flag into a ribbon. I sat on her bed for over an hour, reading the letter over and over until the ink blurred. Then I folded it back up and placed it in my lap like it might vanish if I held it too tightly. I wanted to go to her room. I wanted to sit at the edge of her bed and say all the things I hadn't said in years. I'm sorry. I'm listening. I love you even when you're not achieving. But I didn't. Not yet. She was asleep, and for once I didn't want to wake her to fix something. I just wanted to let her rest. The next morning, I made her breakfast without asking if she wanted it. I didn't say anything big or heavy, just placed the plate on the table and said, "No rush today." She looked at me for a second, then nodded. That was it. But it felt like something had shifted, like we were both starting from scratch. And not because we had to, but because we finally could. Natalie didn't mention the letter. Neither did I. It hung between us, unspoken but present, like the memory of a loud argument you never really resolved but both agreed to move past. That morning, she didn't rush to check her phone or grab her laptop. She sat at the kitchen table in her old sweatshirt, the one with the faded high school logo on the sleeve, and picked at her eggs with a slowness that felt unfamiliar. I watched her, not as a project or a checklist or a reflection of how well I'd done as a parent, just as a person, my daughter. This quiet, brilliant, exhausted person who'd spent years trying to live inside the image I'd built for her, without ever asking if she wanted to. I wanted to tell her everything, that I understood now, that I was sorry, that I'd made my love feel conditional without ever meaning to. But words like that, when said too early, sound like a cover-up, like an apology made for your own relief. So I waited. We went the whole day like that. Soft conversation, no tension, no agenda. She asked if she could take a walk alone, and I said, of course. She took her old headphones and left through the front door without looking back. I stood by the window, watching her disappear into the tree-lined street where she used to ride her bike in a glittery helmet with streamers on the handlebars. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and scrolled through old emails, school award notifications, teacher praise, standardized test results I'd forwarded to relatives. I read through them not with pride, but with a growing ache. I could see now how I had documented her childhood like a resume. Every milestone, every accomplishment, sent out like a press release. I'd told everyone who would listen that she was thriving, but I had never asked her if it felt that way. I thought I was giving her every opportunity. What I was really giving her was no room to fail, no permission to be unsure. And as I looked at those emails now, all I saw were red flags she had carefully wrapped in gold stars. That night, I knocked on her bedroom door after she came back. She was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone without expression. She looked up. I asked if I could sit. She nodded. I didn't prepare a speech. That was the old version of me, the version that needed every sentence to land perfectly. I just sat beside her and told the truth, that I'd read her letter, that it broke me in a way I probably deserved, that I hadn't seen how heavy the weight was because I was too focused on making sure she was always okay. I told her I didn't expect her to forgive me overnight, that I wasn't asking for a performance, that if she wanted to take a break from school, from planning, from me, I would support it. Not as a parent managing a crisis, but as a mother finally understanding the difference between loving someone and shaping them. She didn't cry. She didn't jump into my arms. She just listened, head tilted, face neutral. And when I finished, she said something I wasn't prepared for. I don't want to quit everything. I just want to stop being scared all the time. That's what it came down to. Not rebellion, not laziness, fear. The fear of disappointing someone. The fear of making a single wrong choice and having it undo years of good ones. The fear of being loved less if she failed publicly. That fear lived in her because I had taught it to her, not through cruelty, but through expectations too high to name. She didn't ask me to fix it. She didn't want me to change the past. She just asked me to listen better from now on. And I said yes. Not with conditions, not with advice, just yes. The change didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't like in movies where there's a dramatic apology followed by a healing montage set to soft piano music. It came slowly, like thawing ice, a little bit more each day, with long silences in between. The next morning, Natalie didn't ask for anything, but she didn't hide in her room either. She came downstairs, poured herself cereal, and asked if she could repaint her bedroom. Just like that. No explanation, no reason, just a quiet assertion of control over something small. And I said yes, of course. She chose a color that surprised me, not soft blue or something neutral, but this deep, dusty shade of green that reminded me of pine trees and fog. She painted it over 2 days, alone, with music playing softly from her laptop. I offered to help, but she said she wanted to do it herself. I respected that. The next week, she told me she wasn't going to enroll in college that fall. She said it calmly, clearly, without drama. She didn't need to explain. I could see it in her face. She needed a break from everything. I wanted to ask her what she'd do instead, if she'd apply later, if she'd get a job, but I bit my tongue. For once, I let her make a decision without turning it into a presentation. She didn't need to justify her choice. She just needed someone to witness it and not try to reshape it into something more palatable. A few days later, I came home from work and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook open and 3 library books spread out in front of her. She looked up and said, "I think I want to study creative writing eventually." It hit me like a small earthquake, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Not with fear or apology or a nervous glance for approval, just a statement, simple and personal. I asked what kind of writing she liked. She said maybe memoir, maybe short fiction, something honest, something with space to explore without getting it all right the first time. That night, I lay in bed and thought about how little I knew her, even after 18 years of being her mother. I knew her habits, her schedules, her grades, but not her fears, not her voice, not what made her feel alive. I had been so proud of the path she was on that I never asked if it was a path she chose. I confused compliance with confidence. I mistook her quiet for ease. I mistook myself for a good mother simply because she had never rebelled. A few weeks later, she applied for a part-time job at a small used bookstore near our house, the kind of place with handwritten labels and mismatched chairs and old jazz playing softly in the background. She got it. The first day she came home, smelling like dust and paper and freedom, she smiled without looking tired. She told me a little girl had come in and bought a dog-eared fairy tale book with her own money, and Natalie said she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Joy, real and unfiltered, the kind that doesn't come from winning, but from witnessing something gentle. I started cooking dinner again. Not because she asked me to, but because I wanted to create a space that felt warm and simple. I stopped talking about next steps. I stopped asking about her 5-year plan. I just listened. When she wanted to talk, I was there. When she didn't, I didn't force it. We weren't trying to be perfect. We were trying to be present. That was new.
Sometimes I still slipped. I'd see her reading a novel and casually mention how many authors got their start by majoring in literature. She'd raise an eyebrow and say nothing, and I'd know I was doing it again. I was learning how to parent a person, not a project. That was harder than I expected, but it was also quieter and better. There was one evening in late July when she came into the living room holding a folder. She said she had been journaling and wanted to share something with me, something she wrote about that graduation day. I braced myself for another confession, another wave of guilt, but when I read it, I didn't feel guilt. I felt grief and pride and awe. It was raw and honest and brave. She wrote about standing on stage and looking out at a crowd that expected a version of her she didn't recognize anymore. She wrote that stepping back from the microphone felt like the first decision she'd made entirely for herself. And she wrote that walking off that stage felt like freedom, not failure. I handed the folder back to her and said, "You don't need to be the version I created. I'm ready to meet the version you're becoming." She looked at me for a long time and nodded. That was it. That was enough. We were still learning each other. And we had time. The first person in the family to notice something had changed was my sister, Danielle. She came over one weekend to drop off some boxes of old books for Natalie, a gesture that had always been her way of staying connected. She brought them in through the back door, as she always had, and glanced around before saying, "Where's the Harvard hoodie?" It was a joke, a throwaway line, but I saw Natalie flinch slightly, just for a second. Danielle didn't notice. She kept talking, going on about how proud our whole side of the family was, how everyone was asking when the college party would be. I opened my mouth, ready to explain, but Natalie spoke first. "I'm not going to college this year," she said calmly. Danielle blinked. The silence that followed was short, but sharp enough to cut the air. "Oh," she said, as if the word were caught between syllables. "Taking a gap year?" Natalie nodded, still calm. "Something like that." Danielle looked at me then, eyebrows slightly raised, waiting for me to step in and reassure her, to fill in the blanks with something that would realign the story she was used to. I didn't.
I just nodded once and said, "She's figuring things out, and I'm proud of her." The words tasted strange in my mouth, not because I didn't mean them, but because I wasn't used to defending a choice that wasn't impressive by default. But I meant them more than anything. That night, after Danielle left, I found Natalie sitting in the backyard under the string lights we'd hung 2 summers ago. She was curled up in a chair with a book in her lap, her bare feet pulled up beneath her. I sat beside her without asking. We didn't talk for a while. The crickets were loud enough to fill the silence. Eventually, she said, "Thanks for not making it a thing earlier." I said I was trying to get better at that. She smiled, a small, sideways smile that reminded me of how she used to grin when she was 5 and had just figured something out before anyone else. Later that week, my mother called. She was never subtle. She launched straight into it. "Michelle, I just heard from Danielle. Is it true Natalie's not going to college?" I told her yes, that it was Natalie's decision, that she needed time. My mother exhaled, not a sigh, but the kind of sound that says, "I'm holding back what I really want to say." I could hear her shuffling papers, probably pacing. She asked if I was worried. I said no. She asked if I thought it would look bad on applications later. I said I didn't care. There was a pause, then in the same voice she used when I was 16 and told her I wanted to quit dance class because it made my knees ache, she said, "Don't let her throw her future away out of a mood." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. I didn't argue. I just said, she's not throwing it away. She's choosing a different version. But when I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time thinking about that phrase. A different version. That's what this all was, really. Natalie wasn't lost. She wasn't rebelling. She wasn't falling apart. She was trying to find her version, the version that wasn't built for applause, but for peace. That realization took me back further than I expected, to my own childhood, to the first time I got a B on a math test and my father told me, "You're smarter than that." Not unkindly, but firmly, as if excellence was the standard and anything below it meant something was broken. I remembered how after that, I became obsessed with proving I was always one step ahead. Honor rolls, internships, graduate programs. I had believed deep in my bones that stability came from excellence, and that belief, like an heirloom, was passed to Natalie. Polished and wrapped in praise, I had handed her the same tightrope I'd walked, never realizing how tired I was until I saw her trying not to fall. I started writing things down, not for her, not for a letter, for me. In a spiral notebook I kept in my nightstand, I wrote down everything I had mistaken for love. Achievement, approval, image. I wrote about the pride I felt when strangers complimented her manners, her test scores, her potential, and none of them ever knew her favorite songs, or that she hated competitive games, or that she still had stuffed animals on a shelf above her bed. I had made her exceptional in the eyes of others, but invisible to herself. A few days later, I left my notebook open on the kitchen counter by accident. When I came back from the store, it had been moved. I didn't ask her if she had read it. I didn't need to. That night, Natalie knocked gently on my door and asked if I wanted to go for a walk. Just a short one. We didn't talk much. But halfway through, she said, "You were a good mom. You just didn't know you didn't have to be perfect either." I nodded. The streetlight flickered above us. The air smelled like cut grass and dusk. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to prove anything.
In the weeks that followed, something began to settle between us. It wasn't exactly peace, and it wasn't a return to what we had before. It was something quieter, a kind of mutual recognition, like we were both learning to look at each other again, not through roles, but as people trying to figure out how to live with less noise in our heads. Natalie still worked at the bookstore 3 days a week. On her off days, she started writing more. Not in secret, not with that guarded edge of someone who expects critique, but openly. A mug of tea beside her, music in the background, the sliding door cracked open just enough to let in a breeze. One morning, I found a printed short story left on the table. No note, no request for feedback, just there. I read it after she left for work. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. It was about a girl who leaves the stage mid-speech, walks through the back exit, and keeps walking through an unfamiliar city until she finds a tiny bakery run by a woman who asks no questions and offers her a job washing dishes. The girl doesn't speak for a week, not because she can't, but because no one expects her to say something profound. The final paragraph described her voice returning, not all at once, but in pieces, first through a song she hums without thinking, then through a question she asks a customer, and finally through a story she begins writing in a notebook that no one sees. The last sentence was this: she finally belonged to herself, and that was enough. I cried again, not because the story was sad, but because it was hers. All hers, and she had written it without asking for approval. That meant more than any scholarship or award ever could. Later that week, she asked if I'd go with her to a writing workshop in the city. Not as a participant, just for company. We took the train in together. She wore jeans and a loose white shirt, hair pulled back with a pencil, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. On the ride there, she talked more than she had in weeks. Not about plans, about thoughts, ideas, books, people she'd seen at the store. I listened. That's all I did. No advice, no steering the conversation toward opportunity, just listening. When the workshop ended, she came out with a slight bounce in her step. She said she'd met someone who edits a local literary scene, and that they were looking for new contributors. She smiled when she said it, not the forced kind, but one that reached her eyes. That night, she submitted one of her pieces. They emailed her back the next morning and asked if they could publish it. She said yes, and that was that. We celebrated with takeout and old movies. She picked something black and white and slow-paced with characters who talk too much and do too little, her favorite kind. I watched her watch it, saw the way her face softened at certain lines, saw the person she was becoming in real time. Not someone extraordinary, but someone whole. It hit me then how many years I spent preparing her for a world I was afraid of. I raised her with armor. I taught her to defend against disappointment, to earn affection, to equate structure with safety. But I never taught her how to sit still with herself, to choose softness over speed, to rest. I never taught her that love could exist without effort. I didn't say any of that out loud. Some truths are better shown than spoken, so I let her eat lo mein out of the carton. I let her pause the movie to tell me about a random paragraph she rewrote that morning. I let her exist without comment, without performance, without fear of disappointing the one person who was supposed to know her best. The next morning, before she left for work, she hugged me. Not quickly, not out of obligation. It was quiet and warm and real. She didn't say anything when she let go. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. That was the day I realized the most important thing I'd ever do for her wasn't guiding her. It was stepping aside. Not because I gave up, because I finally understood the difference between control and love. And I chose love. It's been almost a year since that graduation day. The dress Natalie never wore still hangs in her closet, tags intact, but she keeps it, not out of guilt, but as a reminder. A turning point. A moment when she stepped off the path someone else built and started carving her own. Her room is no longer sterile and symmetrical. There's art pinned to the walls, books stacked in corners, a guitar she barely knows how to play but says makes her feel something. And in the drawer where I used to find college brochures, there's a folder of short stories. Some typed, some handwritten, all honest. Our relationship isn't perfect now.
Some days we still clash, like any mother and daughter navigating the blur between adolescence and adulthood. But it's honest. We speak plainly, we laugh more, and when she's quiet, I no longer assume it's because she's broken. Sometimes she's just thinking. Sometimes that's enough. We had dinner last night, just the two of us. I asked her what she wanted to do this fall, and she shrugged and said, "I'm not sure yet. I might take another class or maybe work full-time for a while." I didn't press. I didn't draw a timeline. I just nodded and said, "Whatever you choose, I'm with you." Because I am. Not behind her pushing, not in front of her pulling, but beside her. And that's the mother I want to be now.
If you're a parent listening to this, especially a parent of a high-achieving, quietly anxious, always doing the right thing kind of child, I hope you hear me when I say, stop measuring their worth in milestones. Stop building them like resumes. Sit with them. Know them. Let them tell you who they are before you decide for them. Because one day, you'll blink, and they'll be standing on a stage, or maybe stepping off of it, and you'll realize you knew their accomplishments better than you knew their heart. And if you're the child in this story, maybe you're still living inside someone else's expectations, or maybe you're just starting to break free. I want you to know that you don't need to earn love through perfection. You don't have to trade peace for praise. You are not the sum of your output. You are already enough. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt trapped inside someone else's version of your life, I'd love to hear your journey in the comments. And if you know someone who might need this message, share it. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is quietly step down from the podium and walk toward the life that feels true.